quest for a theory of everything. Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking was a brilliant theoretical physicist, cosmologist, author, and the director of research at the Center for Theoretical Cosmology at the University of Cambridge. He is revered on an equal footing with Albert Einstein and Isaac Newton. He was a location professor of mathematics at the University of Cambridge between 1979 and 2009. Location professor, that is one of the most prestigious academic posts in the world, established by King Charles II in 1664 and given in honor of Henry Lucas, who was Cambridge University's Member of Parliament from 1639 to 1640. Former holders of this post included great scientists like Isaac Newton and Charles Babbage. Despite being crippled by a motor neuron disease, that is ALS or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which confined him to wheelchair and deprived his power of speech, he has done groundbreaking work in physics and cosmology, and his several books have helped science accessible to everyone. Stephen was born on January 8, 1942 in Oxford on the 300th anniversary of the death of Galileo, of which he was quite proud. He was the eldest of Frank and Isabel Hawking's 4 children. His parents highly valued education. Both his parents were educated in Oxford University. Isabel, a Scottish lady, was one of Oxford University's very first women graduates who graduated in philosophy. Frank Hawking, who studied medicine, was a highly respected medical researcher specialized in tropical diseases. Stephen was born into a period of turmoil as German bombers were devastating London. Stephen was always fascinated with science. As a child, he would stretch on the backyard to stare at the stars. His mother later remembered, Stephen always had a strong sense of wonder, and I could see that stars would draw him. Stephen studied in St. Albans School, Oxford. At St. Albans, the school where he studied, Hawking was recognized as a bright, if not exceptional student. Hawking has admitted that he was third from the bottom in terms of ranking, but it was an exceptional class too. He showed a keen passion for science. When he was around 14, he had determined that he would be a scientist. At 16, Stephen and friends are said to have assembled a computer out of recycled parts. He was nicknamed Einstein by his schoolmates. He studied at the University College of Oxford, Oxford University. Hawking began his university education at Oxford University at the age of 17 in 1959. Though Stephen had an aptitude for mathematics, his father had discouraged it, citing lack of job opportunities. He wanted him to take up medicine, but Stephen was not interested in learning biology. Since Oxford did not offer mathematics in those days, Stephen studied physics and chemistry. After a depressing first year, Hawking developed into a popular student of the college, well known for his sense of humor. He loved to dance and was interested in classical music and science fiction. Hawking was even part of the college rowing team. He was a coxswain of his college rowing team. Then later he went on to Cambridge University in 1962 to do his PhD in biology. This is the Trinity College, Cambridge, where Stephen studied. In his final years at Oxford, Hawking began noticing problems with his physical health. He experienced walking difficulties. Occasionally he would fall or he would slur in his speech. While at Cambridge, the symptoms worsened, and his father, who noticed these changes, sent him to a doctor. Doctors identified that he was in the early stages of motor neuron disease, ALS, which meant that the nerves that controlled his muscles were shutting down. Doctors gave him only 2 years to live. He was just 21. It was a devastating news for Hawking and his family. He even drifted into deep depression. However, later he decided to continue his studies as he felt he had a lot of more to do in his life. While at hospital, he had shared a room with a boy with leukemia. Hawking reflected that compared to what the boy was going through, he felt the situation to be tolerable. But the most significant change in his life was the fact that he was in love. At a New Year's party in 1963, Hawking met a language undergraduate named Jane Wilde. She literally became the guiding light of his life. Stephen had met her before the diagnosis of his disease. However, Jane decided to marry Stephen, knowing fully well that he had only a couple of years to live. They were married in 1965. As if by miracle, Stephen fought through his illness and 3 children were born to them. With the sudden realization that he might not live long enough to earn his PhD, Hawking poured himself into his work and research. Inspired by cosmologist Roger Penrose's theorem of a space-time singularity in the center of the black holes, Hawking applied the same thinking to the entire universe, and during 1965, he wrote his thesis on the topic. Hawking's thesis was approved in 1966. There were other positive developments followed by this. Hawking received a research fellowship at Gonville and Case College at Cambridge. He obtained his PhD in applied mathematics and theoretical physics, specializing in general relativity and cosmology in March 1966. His essay, Singularities and the Geometry of Space-Time, shared top honors with one by Penrose to win that year's prestigious Adams Prize. Hawking became a member of the Institute of Astronomy in Cambridge in 1968. In 1970, Hawking discovered the second law of black hole dynamics, and he proposed the 4 laws of black hole mechanics. In 1973, he became a Fellow of the Royal Society at the young age of 32. Fellowship of Royal Society is an award granted by the judges of the Royal Society of London to individuals who have made a substantial contribution to the improvement of natural knowledge, including mathematics, engineering science, and medical science. Hawking radiation or black hole radiation. In 1974, Hawking's research turned him into a celebrity within the scientific world when he showed that black holes aren't the information vacuums that scientists had thought they were. In simple terms, Hawking demonstrated that matter in the form of radiation can escape the gravitational force of a collapsed star. Thus, Hawking radiation was black hole theory. Black holes are some of the most strangest and fascinating objects found in outer space. They are collapsed stars or dead stars, objects of extreme density with such strong gravitational attraction that even light cannot escape from their grasp, even if it comes near enough. Albert Einstein first predicted black holes in 1916 with his general theory of relativity. The term black hole was first coined by American astronomer John Wheeler in 1967. The first one was discovered in 1971. Event horizon is a scenario near black holes where even light breaks its direct path and gets sucked into black holes. Hawking in 1974 did a calculation and predicted, probably without a telescope, that there is a black body radiation released by the black holes at the event horizon. Even though he had a theory to prove it, some scientists ignored him. Later, in 2008, NASA, with their brilliant Fermiscope telescope, had to agree with Hawking when they observed the same. The radiation is now named as Hawking radiation. Hawking's theories on Big Bang and radiation suggest that universe is ever expanding. The stories of the creation have not finished yet. Honors and awards. His announcement about the black hole radiation sent shockwaves of excitement through the scientific world and put Hawking on a path that has been marked by honors, notoriety, and distinguished titles. He received professorship at the prestigious Caltech, that is California Institute of Technology, in the year 1974. Hawking returned to Cambridge in 1975 to a more academically senior post as reader in gravitational physics. The mid to late 1970s were a period of growing public interest in black holes and the physicists who were studying them. Hawking was regularly interviewed for print and television. He also received increasing academic recognition of his work. In 1975, he was awarded both the Eddington Medal and Pius Levin Gold Medal, and in 1976, the Danny Heyman Prize, the Maxwell Medal and Prize, and the Hughes Medal. He was appointed a professor with a chair in gravitational physics in 1977. The following year, he received the Albert Einstein Medal and an honorary doctorate from the University of Oxford. In 1979, Hawking was elected Lucasian Professor of Mathematics at the University of Cambridge. His inaugural lecture in this role was titled, "Is the End in Sight for Theoretical Physics?" In 1985, Hawking lost his ability to speak following a tracheotomy to save his life before a pneumonia outbreak. Since then, Hawking has been using a computer program called Equalizer, developed by a Californian computer programmer, Walt Wolters, a speaking program that could be directed by head or eye movement. Hawking later used an updated version wherein a single cheek muscle attached to a sensor to select words or letters at the rate of one word a minute. With increased risk of losing this ability too, he later collaborated with research teams to develop systems to translate his brain patterns into speech. This is the chair of physics that is occupied by Stephen Hawking. A Brief History of Time, his magnum opus. Published in 1988, A Brief History of Time was Hawking's attempts to bring science nearer to common man. It explains the complex theories in cosmology like nature and origin of the universe and the nature of the black hole. The work was an instant success, spending more than 4 years atop the London Sunday Times bestseller list. Since its publication, it has sold more than 25 million copies worldwide and been translated into more than 40 languages. Some of the major works by Stephen Hawking are A Brief History of Time, 1988, Black Holes and Baby Universe and Other Essays, 1993, The Universe in a Nutshell, 2001, On the Shoulder of Giants, 2002, A Briefer History of Time, 2005, The Grand Design, 2010, My Brief History, 2013, Brief Answers to the Big Questions, 2018. He also wrote some children's books along with his daughter Lucy. They were George's Secret Key to the Universe, 2007, George's Cosmic Treasure Hunt, 2009, George and the Big Bang, 2011. Stephen Hawking experiencing zero gravity. In the late 2006, Hawking revealed in a BBC interview that one of his greatest unfulfilled desires was to travel to space. On hearing this, Sir Richard Branson offered a free flight into space with Virgin Galactic, which Hawking immediately accepted. Besides personal ambition, he was motivated by the desire to increase public interest in spaceflight and to show the potential of people with disabilities. On 26 April 2007, Hawking flew aboard a specially modified Boeing operated by Zero G Corp off the coast of Florida to experience weightlessness. Fears the maneuvers would cause him undue discomfort proved groundless. It was described as a successful test to see if he could withstand the G-forces, gravitational forces involved in spaceflight. Stephen was honored with the prestigious Presidential Medal of Freedom in the White House by US President Barack Obama on the 12th of August 2009. He has also participated in the trial of iBrain, a device which could read thoughts. A film on Stephen Hawking was made in the year 2014 based on Jane Wilde's book, Traveling to Infinity, My Life with Stephen. The movie was titled as Theory of Everything. Hawking has also guest starred in popular TV shows like The Simpsons, Star Trek The Next Generation, and The Big Bang Theory. Stephen Hawking had a peaceful death on March 14th, 2018 at the age of 76 at his home in Cambridge. Some of the quotes by the genius. Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. And however difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at. It matters that you don't just give up. Quiet people have the loudest minds. My goal is simple. It's complete understanding of a universe, why it is as it is, and why it exists at all. Kitty Gale Ferguson has written this profile on Stephen Hawking. Kitty Gale Ferguson, the one who wrote this profile of Stephen Hawking, is an American science writer, lecturer, and former professional musician. She has written several science books for laypersons and youth, including books on biographical facts and the social background in which scientific developments have taken place. Theory of Everything. Theory of Everything is a book by Hawking. He is not satisfied with the theory of general relativity and quantum theory, as they are contradictory while explaining Big Bang and black holes. Theory of Everything is a search for a compact ultimate theory that can explain the universe, its creation, and everything in it. Such a theory does not exist at present. In the Cockcroft Lecture Room on April 29, 1980, scientists and university dignitaries gathered in steep tiers of seats facing a two-story wall of chalkboard and side screen. The occasion was the inaugural lecture by a new location professor of mathematics, a 38-year-old mathematician and physicist, Stephen Hawking. The title of the lecture was a question, "Is the end in sight for theoretical physics?" Hawking started his listeners by announcing that he thought it was. He invited them to join him in a sensational escape through time and space to find the holy grail of science, the theory that explains the universe and everything that happens in it. Stephen Hawking sat silently in a wheelchair while one of his students read his lecture to the assembled company. Judged by appearance alone, Hawking did not seem a promising choice to lead any adventure. Stephen William Hawking was born on 8th January 1942 in Oxford, England. It was exactly 300 years after the death of Galileo, the father of modern science. Frank and Isabel Hawking, Stephen's parents were not wealthy, but they believed in the value of education. So they planned for Stephen to go to Westminster, a famous public school in the heart of London. Unfortunately, Stephen was ill at the time of the scholarship examination for Westminster. Therefore, he attended the local St. Albans school. By the time he was 8, he was thinking seriously about becoming a scientist. Frank Hawking encouraged his son to follow him into medicine, but Stephen found biology too imprecise. He wanted a subject in which he could look for exact answers and get to the root of things. Young Stephen was no prodigy. He was just an ordinary English boy, slow in learning to read. His handwriting, the despair of his teachers. He was ranked no more than halfway up in his class, though he now says in his own defense, it was a very bright class. At 14, Stephen knew that he would pursue mathematics and physics. His father called this impractical, for there were no jobs in mathematics except teaching. Moreover, he wanted his son to attend his own college, and Oxford offered no mathematics. He followed his father's advice and studied chemistry, physics, and only a little mathematics in preparation for the entrance to Oxford. He did well in mathematics, and the interview was brilliantly accepted. In 1959, at the age of 17, Hawking went to Oxford to study natural science and to specialize in physics. He joined University College, his father's college, and the oldest at Oxford, founded in 1249 AD. Nevertheless, for about a year and a half, Hawking was lonely and bored. He was not inspired to relieve his boredom by exerting himself academically. But halfway through his second year, he began enjoying Oxford. He became popular and well accepted among his peers. They remember him as a lively, buoyant, and adaptable. He wore his hair long and was famous for his wit, liked classical music and science fiction, and took part in sports. However, at the end of the third year, Hawking almost floundered. He selected theoretical physics as a speciality. He had then applied to do a PhD at Cambridge and was accepted on condition he got a first from Oxford. Hawking was confident that he could get through successfully, but as the examination day approached, his confidence failed. Hawking ended up disastrously on the borderline between a first and a second. Faced with the borderline result, the examiners summoned Hawking for an interview and questioned him about his plans. In spite of the tenseness of the situation, Hawking managed to come up with a kind of remark for which he was famous among his friends. If I get a first, I shall go to Cambridge. If I receive a second, I'll remain at Oxford. So I expect that you will give me a first. He got his first, and he went to Cambridge. His first year at Cambridge was worse than at Oxford. His slipshod mathematical background caught up with him, and he found general relativity extremely tough. Another far more disastrous problem arose then. During his third year at Oxford, Hawking started getting clumsy. He had fallen once or twice for no apparent reason. The following autumn at Cambridge, he had trouble tying his shoes, and sometimes he had difficulty talking. Shortly after his 21st birthday in 1963, Hawking contracted a rare disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, for which there was no known cure. It caused a gradual disintegration of the nerve cells in the spinal cord and brain. At first, he went into a deep depression. He did not know what he ought to do or what his future would be like. My dreams at the time were rather confused, he admitted. Before my condition was diagnosed, I had been very bored with life. There did not seem to be anything worth doing, but shortly after I came out of hospital, I dreamt that I was going to be executed. I suddenly realized that there were a lot of worthwhile things to do if I were reprieved. Another recurring dream was the idea of sacrificing my life to save others. After all, if I were going to die, I might as well do some good. Hawking's doctors hoped that his condition would stabilize, but the disease aggravated rapidly. They soon informed him that he had only about 2 more years to live. 2 years passed. The progression of the disease had slowed. I didn't die. In fact, although there was a cloud hanging over my future, I found to my surprise that I was enjoying life in the present more than before. Total disability and death, though still a not too distant certainty, were postponed. Hawking had his reprieve, a precarious and a temporary one, but life was precious. At a New Year's party at St. Albans, just before he entered the hospital for tests, Hawking met Jane Wilde. To her, this disheveled graduate student seemed terribly intelligent, eccentric, and rather arrogant. But he was interesting, and she liked his wit. When Jane met him again after his discharge from the hospital, he was really in a pathetic state. I think he has lost his will to live. He was very confused, she commented. She was not, however, put off by his physical or mental condition. She was rather a shy teenager, serious-minded, with a strong faith in God, ingrained from childhood by her mother, and a belief that good can come out of any adversity. Hawking admired her optimism, and their friendship developed slowly. After a while, the two began to realize in Jane's words that together they could make something worthwhile. For Stephen, that made all the difference. He applied for a research fellowship at KS, one of the colleges in Cambridge University. In 1965, at the age of 23, Hawking received his fellowship at KS, and in the July of the same year, Jane and he were married. People who remember Hawking in the university in the late 1960s recall him making his way around the corridors with a cane, supporting himself against the wall. He spoke with what sounded like a slight speech impediment. But more than that, they remember his brashness in sessions involving some of the world's most distinguished scientists. While other young researchers kept a reverential silence, Hawking daringly asked unexpected and penetrating questions. He clearly knew what he was talking about. His reputation as a genius, another Einstein, began then. In 1980, a practical need for funds launched him into a new enterprise that was to have a far-reaching impact on Hawkins and others all over the world. He thought of writing a book about the universe, about the most interesting questions that made him want to study cosmology and quantum theory. Where did the universe come from? Is the universe infinite, or does it have any boundaries? Will it come to an end? If so, how? Is there a complete theory of the universe and everything in it? Is there a beginning of time? Could time run back? The book begins by rewinding the great theories of the cosmos from Newton to Einstein. He wrote the book to make science understandable to non-scientists. He completed the first draft in 1984. While the revision process was going on, he made a trip to Switzerland. There he was down with pneumonia and was left on a life support system. Doctors gave a choice as to whether a tracheotomy operation, which would remove his windpipe, should be conducted or not. It might save his life, but afterwards he would never again be able to speak or make a vocal sound. With grave misgivings, Jane consented. The future looked very bleak, Jane remarked. Hawking could no longer breathe through his mouth and nose, but only through a permanent opening made in his throat. After many weeks of intensive care, he went home to join Jane and his 3 children. He was still too weak and ill to continue his research. Walters, a computer expert in California, sent him a program he had developed called the Equalizer, which allowed Hawking to select words from a screen. He thought he would be able to finish his book. With the support of his student Brian Witt, A Brief History of Time was published in 1988. September 2005 saw the release of an abridged version of the original book. This version was updated to address the new issues that had arisen due to further scientific development. One will encounter a multitude of paradoxes in the book. In science and with people, things are often not what they seem, and pieces that ought to fit together refuse to do so. You will learn that beginnings may be endings, cruel circumstances can lead to happinesses, although fame and success may not. 2 great scientific theories taken together seem to give us nonsense. Empty space isn't empty, black holes aren't black, and a man whose appearance inspires shock and pity takes us laughing to where the boundaries of time and space ought to be, but are not. It is, of course, a miracle that Hawkins has been able to achieve everything he has, that still he is alive. However, when you experience his intelligence and humor, you begin to take his unusual mode of communication and his obviously catastrophic physical problems no more seriously than he seems to himself. That is exactly the way he wants it. He chooses to ignore the difficulty and he expects others to adopt the same attitude. Stephen Hawking has overcome his crippling disease to become the supernova of world physics. The role played by Jane Wilde in Stephen Hawking's life. Stephen met Jane Wilde at a New Year's party just before he had been diagnosed with his disease. She was a language student at the university. Though Stephen appeared to her as a disheveled graduate with extraordinary intelligence, eccentricity, and arrogance, she found him to be interesting and admired his wit. Stephen had gone into deep depression during his initial treatment days. He had almost lost his will to live. The doctors had given him 2 years to live. Jane, however, was not put off by his physical or mental condition. She had strong faith in God, a quality ingrained in her by her mother. She breathed in a lot of positivity into Stephen. She was successful in keeping him optimistic about his future. She strongly believed that something good would definitely come out of any adverse situation. Hawking admired her optimism and a strong friendship developed between them. Jane convinced him that together they could achieve a lot of things, and that made all the difference in Stephen's life and attitude. He shook himself off his depression and applied for a research fellowship at Caius College, Cambridge, determined to carry forward with his research. They got married in the year 1965, and ever since she was a strong pillar of support and was instrumental in maintaining his health. 3 children were born to them who added to their happiness. In 1984, when Stephen's life was threatened by an attack of pneumonia, the doctor suggested a tracheotomy to save his life, though it would deprive him of his power of speech completely. She took a crucial decision to do the surgery as it was important to save his life. The world would not have admired and recognized the great scientist Stephen Hawking had it not been for the presence of Jane in his life.